Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never been this silent, not when entire empires had fallen, not even when the Void Plague wiped out 3 star systems. Yet now, every voice, every whisper, stopped. In the center of the room, the human delegation stood. No speeches, no handshakes, no farewell ceremony. They simply rose from their seats, their movements slow and controlled, and began walking toward the exit. The echo of their boots carried across the chamber. Floor, step, step. The alien ambassadors exchanged confused glances. Humans never. Left without saying something, without at least throwing one last sharp comment into the air. But this was different. Ambassador Valex of the Trend Dominion leaned toward his neighbor and whispered, "What are they doing? This is not protocol." His neighbor, a scaled diplomat from the Karen Alliance, kept his eyes fixed on the humans. "I've heard of this before," he murmured. "It's called the Silent Protocol." A chill ran through Valex's spine. The Silent Protocol was just a rumor, an old human tradition whispered about in military archives. Supposedly, when humans walked away without a word, it meant something irreversible had been set in motion. Something they would not stop. The human leader, a tall woman with gray hair and a calm, unreadable face, didn't look at anyone. Her eyes stayed forward, her steps measured. Behind her, her delegation followed in perfect formation, their faces as cold as stone. From the far side of the chamber, Counselor Gural, a younger, overconfident member, snorted. "Finally," he said aloud, "they admit defeat. Good riddance." The sound of his voice bounced off the walls. No one laughed. At the edge of the room, security drones drifted aside to let the humans pass. They walked straight through the great bronze doors and into the main hall without turning back once. In the council's observation dome, the chamber's glass walls showed the human ships leaving orbit. Hundreds of them, sleek and black, sliding silently away from the station in perfect alignment. They didn't signal. They didn't broadcast coordinates. They didn't even say goodbye. The High Chancellor, seated in the central throne-like chair, frowned deeply. "This is not right," she said under her breath. One of her advisors stepped closer. "Shall we send a probe after them?" The Chancellor didn't answer. She kept watching the ships fade into the starfield. Hours later, the council floor had mostly emptied. Only the Chancellor and a few senior members remained, discussing the next steps. That's when a voice from the far end of the chamber called out, "Chancellor, you should see this." It was an aide standing beside the central table where the humans had sat. In the middle of the polished surface was a small object. It hadn't been there before. The device was no larger than a human palm, made of smooth black metal. At its center was a single round button, glowing faintly red. No markings, no wires, no ports. Just the button. The Chancellor approached slowly. "Where did this come from?" The aide swallowed nervously. "It wasn't detected by the scanners when they arrived, but the moment they left," he looked down at the glowing object. "It was just here." The senior council members crowded around. "It could be a gift," suggested one. "Or a bomb," said another. "No," whispered Counselor Velex, his scales shifting in unease. "It's worse." The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Velex hesitated. "In our archives, there is mention of a human failsafe, a test. They leave behind an object. If you press it, they return." The Chancellor frowned. "Return? Why would that be a threat?" Valex's voice dropped. "Because they don't return to talk." A decision was made quickly. The device was placed in a secure vault deep beneath the council station, shielded by energy barriers, guarded by drones, and monitored at all times. Still, the button glowed. Red, steady, waiting. That night, a lone figure walked the empty halls of the vault. The air was cold, the hum of energy fields vibrating through the walls. A guard on duty leaned against the console, half-dash asleep. The figure stopped before the containment field, staring at the device inside. It looked so simple. Just a little button. The stories couldn't be real. Humans didn't hide secret weapons in toys. Right? The figure's hand twitched. The glow seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. Closer. One fingertip hovered just above the smooth red surface. Somewhere, far beyond the Council's star charts, a silent human fleet slept in the void. Their hulls were black as the abyss, their engines cold, their AI commanders dormant. And deep in the heart of that dark armada, a single light began to blink. The debate over the button. The council chamber was tense the next morning. No ceremonial greetings, no polite exchanges. Only the heavy presence of fear in the air. The small black device sat in the middle of the table, still glowing with its faint red light. Chancellor Marin entered, her robe trailing behind her, and stopped in front of it. Reports? She demanded. A security officer stepped forward. We scanned it with every tool we have. No radiation, no energy emissions except for the glow itself. We can't open it, we can't take it apart, and we can't even scratch the surface. Counselor Gorel, the same one who had mocked the humans yesterday, scoffed. Then it's just a bluff, a toy to scare us. Ambassador Valix hissed quietly. You don't understand humans. They don't bluff with things like this. The Chancellor fixed her gaze on him. You spoke yesterday about a rumor. The silent protocol. Valix nodded slowly, his scaled fingers tightening on the edge of the table. In old war records, there is mention of humans leaving behind an object of return. No one alive has ever seen one. But the stories say that pressing the button summons them, and not for peace talks. The room shifted uneasily. Counselor Marthel, a tall insectoid diplomat, clicked her mandibles. Summons them for what? Valex's voice was low. Retaliation. The debate began. Some argued the humans had left. In humiliation, and the button was nothing more than a psychological weapon. They're gone, Gorel said with a smirk. We control the major trade routes now. If they wanted war, they would have stayed. Others were not convinced. Admiral Kairos, the Council's military commander, leaned forward. You didn't see their faces when they walked out. I did. They weren't beaten. They were decided. Decided on what? The Chancellor asked. Kairos hesitated. On something we won't like. A scientist from the Tsar Research Corps offered another observation. We analyzed the material of Y. The device. It does not match any known alloy or synthetic in our records. It is alien even to us. The most likely source is human nanoforge technology, but the signature doesn't match their current designs. So, older tech? The Chancellor asked. The scientist nodded. Much older. A cold silence followed. Everyone knew the humans had fought wars before the Council ever existed. Wars so devastating they erased entire star clusters. If this was from that time, the Chancellor finally stood. The safest course is to lock it away. No one touches it. No one even goes near it without my permission. She gestured to the guards. The device was sealed in a transparent energy case and carried to the vault again. But even inside the vault, its glow never faded. That night, a storm raged outside the Council Station. Violent magnetic waves from the nearby pulsar. Most officials had retired to their quarters. In the vault room, a young aide named Loran stood in front of the containment field. He had been there for hours. The button's glow seemed stronger now, casting a red reflection in his eyes. He spoke softly, as if to himself. What are you? He thought about the way the humans had left, so quiet, so cold. He thought about the stories told in academy training, the ones the instructors dismissed as myths. What if it really was just a trick? What if it did nothing at all? He stepped closer. The hum of the energy shield filled the air. One more step, and he was within arm's reach. Back in the council chamber, Admiral Kairos was meeting privately with the Chancellor. "You should destroy it," he urged. "If it is a weapon, keeping it here is a risk." "Destroy it?" Marin shook her head. "We can't even scratch it. And if it is a summoning device, destroying it might be the thing that triggers." "Them?" Kairos frowned. "Then what do you suggest? Sit here and wait for them to come back on their own?" Marin didn't answer. In the vault, Loran placed his hand on the shield control. One button press, and the barrier would drop. One more press, and he could touch the device itself. His breath quickened. Suddenly, alarms blared. Kairos and Marin froze. As a voice came over the comms, "Security breach in Vault 3. Shield is down." The Chancellor's heart pounded. "Who's inside?" The voice answered, "Aide Loran, Chancellor. He's reaching for it." Marin's voice was sharp. "Stop him." But it was too late. Loran's finger hovered over the glowing red surface. His lips curled into a nervous smile. "Let's see if the stories are true." He pressed it. Far beyond the edge of the galaxy, in the silent graveyards of space, thousands of massive shapes began to stir. Engines that hadn't burned in centuries roared to life. Weapons long thought forgotten locked into position. Artificial minds older than the Council itself woke and turned their gaze toward the stars. The signal had been sent, and humanity was coming. The button is pressed. The glowing red light went dark for a single heartbeat, and then began to pulse. Slow at first, then faster. The color deepened, shifting from red to a sharp, burning crimson that seemed to pierce the eyes of everyone. In the vault, Loran stepped back, suddenly feeling cold. The air seemed heavier, like the station itself was holding its breath. Above the vault, in the grand chamber, the alarms shifted tone, no longer the standard intruder alert, but a long, deep note no one had heard in living memory. Counselor Valex froze. That's a war tone," he whispered. "It's only programmed for one kind of signal." The Chancellor demanded. "What signal?" Valex's voice trembled. "Incoming human fleet." Across the station, screens flickered to life. Not just on the council floor, but in private quarters, corridors, and even the public plazas. The image was the same everywhere. A dark starfield, empty, until shadows began to appear. At first, they looked like asteroids drifting from the void. But then they moved in unison. Thousands of black ships emerged from the darkness, each one larger than the next. They had no running lights, no identifying codes, only massive, jagged silhouettes cutting through the stars. In the Council's military command center, Admiral Kairos gripped the edge of the tactical table. "Range?" A young officer's voice cracked. 200 light years and closing. No hyperspace wake detected. They're already here, sir." Kairos' eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. They can't just..." Before he could finish, the image on the screens shifted. A single warship appeared front and center. Its hull was black as obsidian, its structure layered like armored muscle. No engines were visible, yet it drifted forward with unstoppable purpose. Came the voice. 3 words, spoken in flawless galactic standard. You pressed it. The sound echoed through every speaker on the station. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't angry. It was worse. It was calm. The Chancellor straightened. "Open a channel. All frequencies." The comm officer shook his head. "Mom, they're not receiving. They're broadcasting only." Valex leaned forward, his voice low. "That means they're not here to talk." Meanwhile, in the shadow of the human flagship, the rest of this fleet began to appear. They came in waves, massive city-sized carriers, long spear-like destroyers, and hulking fortress ships bristling with weapons. Some designs were new, others looked ancient, covered in scars from battles fought centuries ago. Sensors struggled to count them. Estimates rose by the second. One thing was clear, this was not a token force. This was everything. Inside the council chamber, arguments broke out. We must apologize immediately. No, we must prepare our defenses. This is over. Nothing can stop them now. The Chancellor slammed her hand on the table. Enough. The lights flickered, then died. Only the screens stayed on, showing the human flagship looming closer. In the deep black beyond the station, one of the Council's defense satellites powered up its targeting systems, locking onto the nearest human vessel. For a brief moment, the targeting reticle blinked red. And then, it vanished. The satellite's core imploded without an explosion, collapsing in on itself until nothing remained. Kairos stared at the readings. They didn't fire a weapon. The science officer's voice was faint. They erased it. At the molecular level. The Chancellor turned to Valix. What do they want? Valix shook his head. It doesn't matter what they want. The button was never about negotiation. It was about permission. Permission for what? Valix's eyes locked on the flagship. For war. A deep hum began to fill the air, felt more than heard. It vibrated through the station walls, into the bones of everyone aboard. The human ships were aligning, their black holes reflecting. No light, their weapons shifting into position with terrifying precision. One final transmission came from the flagship. Not a threat. Not even a demand. Just a set of coordinates, leading straight to the Council's homeworld. Every screen went black. The Chancellor's voice broke the silence. We have to evacuate the capital. Now. Kairos shook his head. It's too late. They'll be there before we can even warn them. And somewhere, deep in the void, the human fleet accelerated, moving in a way no Council ship could match, as if the very laws of physics bent to let them pass. Far above the station, Laurent sat in a holding cell. He stared at the floor, his mind numb. A guard approached, his face pale. Do you understand what you've done? Laurent's lips trembled. I just wanted to see what would happen. The guard didn't reply. He turned and walked away, leaving Laurent alone with the sound of distant alarms and the ghostly hum of something vast drawing closer. Return of the fleet. The human flagship cut through the void like a black blade. Behind it, the rest of the fleet emerged in full view. The Council had underestimated the reports. It wasn't hundreds of ships. It was thousands. They came in perfect formation, silent as death, their hulls glinting faintly under distant starlight. Many bore strange markings, emblems from human wars so ancient that most of the galaxy had forgotten them. And yet, these ships were no relics. They were alive. In the Council's command center, Admiral Kairos watched the incoming data streams. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. They're not broadcasting ID codes, no transponders. They're flying. Dark. A junior officer swallowed hard. Sir, if they fire, we can't stop them. Our defense net isn't built for this scale. Kairos didn't look away from the screens. This isn't a war fleet. This is an extinction fleet. On the Council. Homeworld. Panic had already begun. Massive evacuation ships launched from the cities, clogging the upper atmosphere with bright engine trails. But they were too slow. Even at top speed, they needed hours to reach safe hyperspace lanes. The humans would arrive in less than one. From the flagship, a single message reached the Council's high command. Surrender your archives or vanish. There was no voice. No visible sender-only text. The meaning was clear. The Chancellor stared at the words. Archives? Why would they want those? Valex's eyes darkened. Because the archives hold everything. Our history, our technology, every secret. The galaxy has ever kept. Kairos added grimly, and with that knowledge, they wouldn't just defeat us, they'd own the future. The debate began immediately. We can't hand them over. If we refuse, they'll wipe us out. They'll wipe us out anyway. The Chancellor raised her hand for silence. We have no proof they'll even accept our surrender. This could be nothing more than a formality before they strike. Suddenly, the chamber lights dimmed. A holographic projection filled the air, an image of the human fleet in orbit above some distant world. Except this world wasn't distant. It was the Council's agricultural moon, Karvesh, the projection. Zoomed in, Karvesh's surface was intact. Its cities were untouched, but its people, millions of them, were gone. No signs of struggle, no destruction, just empty streets. Where are they? A counselor whispered. Kyros answered without looking away. Gone, all of them, without a shot fired. In the council archives, the historians scrambled through old files, desperate to understand. They found records of ghost weapons, human, devices that could erase a crew or population, leaving buildings and machines untouched. The technology had been banned centuries ago, but clearly humans had kept it. In orbit above Karvesh, the human ships rotated in perfect unison. Their black hulls shifted and reformed like living metal, adapting to new configurations. Massive, cannon-like structures unfolded, each one glowing faintly blue. They're charging weapons. The sensor officer reported. Kyro slammed his fist on the table. They're demonstrating. Next time, it won't be empty cities. Back on the station, the Chancellor turned to Velex. You said you knew who pressed the button. Who was it? Velex glanced toward the holding cells. An aide. Young, stupid, but now he's the reason this galaxy will burn. The Chancellor's expression hardened. Then we have one option left. We give them the one thing they want. Before they reach the capital. Her order went out. Prepare the archives for transfer. But when the archivists tried to access the deepest vaults, they found every system already breached. Files were missing. Whole sections erased. The humans didn't need permission to take them. They had already started. On the flagship, deep within the command bridge, the human admiral stood in silence. His uniform bore no rank insignia, only a small silver emblem in the shape of a closed fist. A younger officer approached. Sir, the Council is preparing to surrender the archives. The admiral's voice was calm. It doesn't matter. We already have what we came for. Then why stay? The officer asked. The admiral turned to the viewport, where the Council homeworld was now a bright blue orb hanging in the dark. His eyes were cold, because they pressed the button. As the fleet closed in, all civilian and military channels across the galaxy lit up with a single untraceable broadcast, an old human war anthem, slow and heavy, echoing through the void. Every ship, every station, every world heard it. It was not a song of victory. It was a funeral march. The human fleet moved with terrifying precision. No cum chatter, no random maneuvers. Every ship aligned as if guided by a single mind. From the Council's orbital defenses, thousands of automated turrets locked on to the incoming vessels. Energy. Cores charged. Missiles armed. Admiral Kairos stood over the tactical map. Hold fire until my order, he commanded. We don't provoke until we know their first move. But humanity didn't wait. The first strike came without sound, without light. One moment, the Council's frontline defense platforms were ready. The next, they were gone. Not destroyed. Gone. Empty space spun where massive fortresses had floated. Seconds before, a stunned sensor officer whispered, no explosion. No debris. They just vanished. Kairos's jaw tightened. Quantum displacement. They moved them. Somewhere. Somewhere? The Chancellor demanded overcomes. Kairos' voice was grim. If we're lucky, into deep space. If we're not into a star. The humans advanced another kilometer. Their ships didn't swerve, didn't slow, didn't even appear to notice the weapons still aimed at them. Then, in a single coordinated action, they fired. The Council's military command watched in horror as beams of pure gravitational force lanced out from the human fleet. They didn't tear through ships, they crushed them. Cruisers imploded like tin cans. Smaller corvettes were pressed flat in an instant, their hulls folding in on themselves before drifting apart as twisted wreckage. No energy shields stopped it. No armor resisted it. Kairos barked orders. Scatter formation. Scatter. The command came too late. A third of the Council's defense fleet was gone in under 30 seconds. The survivors broke formation, fleeing toward the far side of the planet, but the humans didn't give chase. They weren't here for sport. They were here for a message. Then, something unexpected happened. From the human flagship, a new transmission arrived, not to the Chancellor, not to the Council command, but directly to every civilian unit on the planet. That it was a video feed at an empty Council chamber. The black device, the button sitting in the center. The voice that followed was calm, steady, and terrifyingly certain. You pressed it. You invited us. And now we will decide what remains. The effect on the population was instant. Panic. Riots erupted across the cities. People abandoned homes, flooded spaceports, and overloaded evacuation shuttles. But the humans didn't fire on them. Not yet. Instead, their fleet spread out, encircling the planet in a slow, deliberate blockade. In the Council's emergency bunker, the Chancellor slammed her hands on the table. There, waiting. But for what? Valex answered without hesitation. For us to surrender. But not just the archives. Us. Kairos turned sharply. You mean the entire Council? Valex nodded. Every leader. Every person responsible for pressing the button or allowing it to be pressed. They will not settle for anything less. Meanwhile, on the flagship, the human admiral reviewed the latest data feed. His second-in-command approached. The planets. Population is attempting mass evacuation, she reported. The admiral didn't look up. Let them. Fear will spread faster than any weapon. Back on the surface, in the great skyport of Eldrin City, civilians pushed and shoved their way onto transport ships. A mother clutched her child, looking up at the black shapes drifting above the clouds. One of the human ships moved overhead, its shadow blotting out the sunlight. The ground rumbled as its massive engines hummed, but it didn't fire. It simply passed by, a silent reminder of power. In the Council's war room, Kairos leaned close to the Chancellor. If we don't fight back now, we may never get another chance. The Chancellor stared at him. And what happens if we do? We'll be wiped out in minutes. Kairos' voice dropped. Then at least we die standing. Before the Chancellor could reply, a sudden power surge hit the room. Lights flickered, screens went black. And then a single feed replaced them all. The human admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship. His gaze was steady, unblinking. You have one rotation, he said. One rotation to deliver the ones responsible. Fail, and this planet will be empty before the second sun rises. The transmission ended. Kairos' hand curled into a fist. They're not bluffing. Valix's voice was low. Humans never bluff when the button is pressed. The Chancellor closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with cold resolve. Then we find the aid, she said. And we pray handing him over will be enough. But in a prison cell deep below the city, Loron sat in the dark, unaware of the hunt that had begun. Above him, the human fleet waited patient, silent, and ready to finish what it started with. One small press of a glowing red button. The truth about the button, the emergency bunker, felt smaller now. Not because the walls had closed in, but because the weight of dread pressed on every person inside. The Chancellor stood at the head of awe. The table, her eyes locked on the glowing tactical display of the human fleet surrounding their homeworld. "We have one rotation," she said. "One. We need answers before time runs out." She turned to Velix. "You said there were old records about the silent protocol and the object of return. Tell me everything." Velix's scales shifted. In unease, "The Council wasn't the first to rule the galaxy," he began. "Before us, there were many powers. And one by one, they all fell." "To who?" asked Kairos. Velix's voice was grim. "To humanity. But not by conquest alone. They built something else. Something worse." He tapped his console, bringing up an ancient, grainy image, a human warship surrounded by faint shimmering spheres. "This," he said, "is called a failsafe armada. It was their last resort. If humanity was ever pushed to the brink, they could vanish from the galaxy, completely hide their fleets, their colonies, even their homeworld in deep black space. Then they would wait for a signal." The Chancellor's breath caught. "The button," Velix nodded. "The button is that signal. It tells them not just that they must return, but that diplomacy has failed completely. It is not a call for negotiation. It is a call for total retaliation." Kairos frowned. "Why give it to the Council at all?" Velix glanced at the tactical display. "Because humans believe in one thing above all choice. They leave the button as a test. If their enemies leave it untouched, it means there's still a path to peace. But if it's pressed," Kairos finished the sentence, "it means the enemy has chosen war." The Chancellor shook her head slowly. "But we didn't choose." One fool did." Velix's gaze was steady. "To them, that doesn't matter. The button wasn't just pressed by him. It was pressed under our watch. The moment it happened, humanity's mind was made up. Above the planet, the human fleet began to shift positions. Giant carrier ships moved to the outer ring, while enormous dreadnoughts slid forward. Their weapons glowing faint blue. Kairos watched the movement from the war room. "They're preparing for a ground strike. They mean to take the capital." In the Chancellor's mind, the calculations raced. They could hand over Loren, the aide. But what if that wasn't enough? What if the humans didn't stop there? She looked at Velix. "Do they always destroy everything?" Velix's eyes narrowed. "No, sometimes they take it. And when they take it, you never get it back." Hours later, the human flagship sent another transmission. This time, the image was not the Admiral. It was an older Mansguard with a voice like stone. "You have 30 standard minutes to decide. Bring the one who pressed it. Bring those who let him. And bring the archives. Do this, and perhaps you will see another sunrise." The feed ended without another word. In the holding cell, Loren sat against the wall, staring at the floor. When the guards arrived, he looked up. "You're here to let me out?" he asked. The head guard's face was hard. "Not exactly." As Loren was escorted through the corridors, he caught glimpses of the sky through high windows. Black shapes hung above the cloud, silent, unmoving, endless. "Are they really here for me?" he asked quietly. No one answered. In the bunker, Kairos leaned toward the Chancellor. "If we give him up, they might take him and leave." "Might," the Chancellor repeated. "And if they don't, then at least we bought time." The lift doors opened. Loren was brought into the room. He looked small under the harsh lights, his hands bound, his eyes darting between the powerful figures seated around the table. The Chancellor stepped forward. "Do you understand what you've done?" Loren's voice shook. "I just wanted to see. I thought maybe it wasn't real." Kairos slammed his fist on the table. You've doomed us all for curiosity? Tears welled in Loran's eyes. I didn't think they'd really come. Velix's voice was cold. Humans always come. Outside, the fleet began to hum again, that deep, bone-shaking vibration that could be felt across the entire planet. The council members exchanged grim looks. Time was running out. The Chancellor turned to Kairos. Prepare the transfer shuttle. We're going to meet them face to face. Kairos hesitated. That's a risk. She met his eyes. The risk is already here. This is our last move before the end. As the shuttle lifted from the surface, carrying the Chancellor, Kairos, Velix, Loran, and the sealed data cores of the archives, every screen in the city turned black. Then, one by one, they lit up with a single image. The human admiral waiting on the flagship, but his voice was calm, final. Welcome aboard. The galaxy changes today. The final silence, the council shuttle glided silently through the void, dwarfed by the black giants surrounding it. No escorts. No interference. Just the crushing awareness that thousands of human warships watched its every move. Inside, no one spoke. Loran sat at the far end, his hands bound, staring at the floor. The Chancellor sat upright, her face pale but steady. Kairos kept his eyes on the viewport, memorizing the layout of the human fleet, though he knew there would be no battle plan. To save them, Velix simply closed his eyes, whispering a prayer in his native tongue. The docking clamps of the human flagship locked onto the shuttle with a deep metallic thud. A moment later, the hatch opened. The council delegation stepped into a wide, dimly lit corridor. The walls were smooth black metal, lined with faint blue veins of light pulsing like a heartbeat. The air was cold, heavy, and still. At the far end, the human admiral stood waiting. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a plain black uniform, with the silver emblem of a closed fist over his heart. His eyes were sharp, calm, and unblinking. You brought what I asked for? He said, his voice carrying easily down the hall. The Chancellor nodded once, the one who pressed it, and the archives. Two human soldiers, silent, armored in matte black, took Loran by the arms. He didn't resist, but his voice cracked. Please. I didn't know. The Admiral raised a hand, and Loran fell silent. They entered a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a circular platform. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing images of the Council homeworld, its cities, and every ship still in orbit. The Admiral approached the archives, sealed in their containment case. With a simple gesture, the case opened without a sound, and the data cores floated into the air. Tiny lights scanned their surfaces before they vanished, absorbed into the ship's systems. Kairos stepped forward, his voice tense. You have what you came for. Now leave our world. The Admiral looked at him without expression. The archives were never the only reason. He turned to the Chancellor. When the button is pressed, it is not simply a call for war. It is a judgment, a measure of whether a civilization can control its fear, its pride, its greed. You failed. The Chancellor's hands clenched at her sides. We did not press it. One man did. The Admiral's gaze hardened. You allowed him to, and that is enough. Without warning, the displays shifted to a single image, the Council homeworld, seen from orbit. From the surrounding human ships, lines of blue light began to form, linking vessel to vessel until the entire fleet was connected in a massive, glowing web. Energy built between them, humming like the breath of a storm. Kairos's voice was low. Planetary strike. The Admiral's eyes remained fixed on the Chancellor. Evacuations have been allowed to proceed, that people may live. But the seat of your power will not. The Council delegation was escorted back to the shuttle. No one spoke during their return. Outside the viewport, the fleet remained motionless. until they cleared the flagship's shadow. Then it began. From above the planet, hundreds of beams of pure gravitational force lanced downward, not in explosions, but in silent precision. Cities folded in on themselves. Towers crumpled like paper. The council palace shattered into dust before the walls could even collapse. Within minutes, the entire capital was gone, erased, without fire, without rubble. Just an empty, flat scar on the surface where the heart of the government had been. When it was over, the beams faded. The fleet reformed into perfect lines. The human flagship transmitted a final message. To every surviving ship and settlement, we will watch. We will remember. Do not call us again. Then, as suddenly as they had come, the human fleet vanished. No hyperspace jump detected. No trace of their engines. One heartbeat they were there. The next, only stars remained. From orbit, the scar. On the council homeworld was visible even to the naked eye, a permanent reminder carved into the land dot in the grand chamber. What was left of the council sat in stunned silence. No one dared to speak. The only sound was the faint hum of the chamber systems. Velex finally broke the quiet. This will be remembered for 1,000 years. The Chancellor didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the stars beyond the window. Her voice barely. A whisper. It will be remembered, she said, as the day silence came and never left. Far away, in the black between galaxies, the human fleet drifted once more into hiding. Their engines cold, their weapons at rest, waiting for the next signal. The button sat in a sealed chamber aboard the flagship, its glow gone. For now. End of story.